The Great American Think-Off, Saturday at 7:50 p.m. Eastern, 4:50 p.m. Pacific, live on C-SPAN.
July 17th, 1944, it is a very special date. It's a very emotional date, and there's a tremendous history. The largest single explosion in the United States up until that time had taken place here at Port Chicago, and it was the largest stateside disaster with the largest number of loss of life. What happened that night was there was one cargo ship, the E.A. Bryant, that was just being finished, topped off. There was over 10 million pounds of explosives on the ship, on the rail cars, and on the pier that was leading out to it. There was 11 more rail cars that they were going to finish topping off the E.A. Bryant, and that would have been 11 million pounds of explosives were on the dock and in the ship. There was another ship that was on its maiden voyage. It hadn't gone anyplace. It had just been built. It had just been brought in from the state of Washington, and was on its maiden voyage, and they were just going to start loading that ship. At about 10:17 that night, there was two explosions. The first explosion, they figure, because everybody that was in the area unfortunately perished, but the first explosion was at 10:17. And they think the rail cars on the piers went up. 7 seconds later, the ship went up, which had 10 million pounds of explosions. It was just a huge explosion. The fireball went approximately 2 miles into the air. Everything on the shore was vaporized. All of the piers, both ships. You couldn't find anything of the ship that had the 10 million pounds of explosions in it, ammunitions in it. The next ship that was right next to it, what was empty, was thrown up in the air. It was ripped into 3 pieces and tossed 500 yards out into the bay. All of the pier tops were gone. All of the rail cars were gone. The locomotives were gone, and 320 people perished during that explosion. The Navy took the lead in investigating and doing the rescue and the recovery that night, but it was just amazing. There was a boxcar just slightly back from the loading area that was burning with bombs and depth charges on it, and there was a group of black sailors that took the fire hoses into the boxcar and put the fire out, or there could have been more explosions after that. It was a tremendous night for individuals and the heroism that took place that night. The Navy had the responsibility of shipping the ammunitions to the war front, and the tragedy that took place here was only part of the story. They still needed to do the shipping. They still needed to send all of the ammunitions and the explosives to the war front. What they did was, after the explosion, after July 17th, 1944, they took all of the survivors from here over to Mare Island, and they were putting them back to work. As the story goes, of the Port Chicago story in 1944, there was approximately 250 sailors that would not go back to work without better training, without better safety practices. It was wartime. The Navy needed to ship that. The Navy was explained to the 250 that they would be charged with mutiny with a court-martial if they did not go back to work. And all but 50 did go back to work. Those 50 were charged with a court-martial, and they were charged with mutiny, and they were found guilty, and they were sentenced to 15 years in the brig. As the war got over, they let most of these people out at different times. They were shipped all over the country, and unfortunately that was a long time ago. That was 55 years ago, and there's not very many left of those people that were charged with mutiny to tell us their side of the story now.
Friday, the American Bar Association began a 2-day conference on the gun industry and liability for gun violence. During this discussion,